So, Darren, I have to share what we just heard as we're sitting in the back of the theater. A Academy member, as on her way out, said, "I salute you and I leave you," which I think is kind of high praise, right? That's she's having a reaction. She's feeling a strong reaction to what it is that you've made. Is that part of what you were driven by to actually kind of elicit reaction?
I mean, yeah, a little bit. I mean, we always knew it was a strong cocktail. It came very much from a place of a lot of frustration and I guess a certain amount of, as Ari calls it, impotent rage on what was going on in the world. And I just kind of took all that passion that I was thinking of outside of my filmmaking work and tried to turn it into a story.
I want to ask you about your creative process. When you have this idea for a film and you write it very quickly, you take it to your partners at Protozoa, and what does the creative process look like? What is the initial conversation that you have with your producers, and what are the steps on this film that may be unlike others that you've made before?
Well, normally we spend we've spent a really long time sculpting the scripts. This one I was very interested in. I was kind of inspired by songwriters who can take a single emotion and kind of write something that is very effective for a whole generation of people. And I just had this idea of what happens if I follow a single emotion, and can you make a film out of that? And so I wrote this without telling them, which was weird because I usually include them in everything. But I just was like, it was more of an experiment to see what came out. And then when I showed it to Scott and Ari, they were, they both had very, very, intense reactions to it and said, there's something here. And then we just started to explore what it would be to do it. We really made the film very differently. It was a whole different process. There was a lot more, I wouldn't say it was improvisation, but there was a lot more of like building as we went along. And so that was through the production design for sure, and the cinematography, and then definitely with the sound design when the score suddenly didn't make sense anymore for the movie, and we had to rely. But it was a long 53-week long post. Mostly because there's only 3 shots in the film. We're only over her shoulder, on her face, or her POV, so there's no coverage in the entire movie. To go back to an edit room without a wide shot is
It's not
not
fun for your editor.
Not fun for the editor. So every single moment, Jennifer had to be working, and that's like the accomplishment for me of the film, is like you never kind of lose track with her. You may like not quite understand what she's experiencing, but she's keeping you safe and keeping you cocooned, and that's reinforced by all of the different departments that we have up here.
So, Scott, you and Ari have strong reactions to what he's brought you. What does the conversation go from there? And what does the rehearsal process do in terms of satisfying the questions and concerns that you have as producers?
I mean, my first reaction was, knowing Darren's work, both obviously in film and what he's passionate about outside of film. My first reaction was to how powerful it was, and felt it was really important film to make, and something I felt passionate that we'd have to make right away. I supported that. Ari supported that, and Ari can speak to the rehearsal.
Yeah. So the rehearsals, we had 3 months of rehearsals, which is something that we've never done before, certainly, and I think is unusual. And that was really an opportunity to do a number of things. We taped out the whole house, the first floor in yellow and the second floor in green in a warehouse in Brooklyn. We went through the entire script with the actors. And so that became a period of time where the actors brought a lot to taking all these ideas that were in the script, of which there were very many, and then really grounding them in character and making the relationship feel very real. And so that process really cemented a lot for the film.
You also make a very fundamental and important casting decision very, very early on, and that is casting the house and the way in which this house is going to become a character in the story. Could you talk about your conversations with your production designer about what this house had to be, what the references were, and how you came about building it?
I think it started with location scouting. And at first we were like, oh, maybe we'll find a house in a field that's a metaphor for planet Earth.
Or in Brooklyn.
Which would have been great. Oh, we did look in Brooklyn for a while, too. The one nice thing that came out of the scouting is we stumbled on an octagon-shaped house, which was a style of Victorian home. That was a big deal. Talk a little bit about that and the science behind it.
So we saw this octagon house, and we were sort of struck by how strange the shape was. And there was something. It was a house, but it was also sort of a little bit more than a house. We looked inside and saw that the rooms, because it was fit inside an octagon, all had kind of strange shapes to them. And then we dug a little deeper and saw that the idea of the octagon house in Victorian architecture was based on one of the people that was a proponent of it was a phrenologist, and he was a guy that was mapping the human brain via the shapes of people's skulls, and his idea was that the octagon house was sort of the most pleasing shape for the brain, and that was enough for us. We're like, all right, we're doing
That's
an
cool.
We're doing an octagon house.
So, Matthew, your director says there's going to be 3 shots, over-the-shoulder point of view or close-up of Jennifer, and you're shooting in an octagon house. And you're going to shoot 16mm go? Is that basically the instructions?
Well, I mean, I expect a certain box when I work with Darren every single time. I mean, one of the things that we've always done is create rules for ourselves. And we've both come a long way in how to deal with those rules and how to manipulate them. When we talk about the rehearsals, one of the things we did was shoot those rehearsals. We shot the entire film with a 5D and just worked the scenes out. And it gave, some of the camera crew an opportunity to understand how limited the language was. Mm-hmm. It gave us an opportunity, but it gave the actors an opportunity to know where they had, what space and what box they had to work in. But I think what we took away from that is that we learned after we cut that together where we actually did have to cut. We did a lot of moves in rehearsal that were oneers, but then we ended up rotating the camera around so much, and then knowing full well we were going to go to an octagonal house, moving in a circle. It was just we had to start to be a little more strategic, and in having no coverage at all, we used blocking to. Her POV could be a wide shot of 3 people, or it could be over the shoulder or a tight shot of somebody, depending on where she stopped. So we started to get a little more clever with the blocking. So all that came from rehearsing, really.
Craig, I want to ask you about the sound design, about how important it was to try to get natural sounds, where you got sounds for the heartbeat in the wall. There's some amazing things that happened during the childbirth sequence. What was the rule in terms of what you could invent and what you could find in nature and manipulate?
The basic rule with Darren is natural sounds, trying to find natural sounds, organic sounds, and manipulating them in such a ways, different ways to sort of bend or morph or pitch or reverse, whatever it takes, but nothing synthetic. So everything was sort of based in sort of a real thing. So the heartbeat, for instance, just discussions with Darren and I about mammals and large animals and stuff, and we sort of hit upon elephant whales and sort of 25 BPM, 16 BPM, 42 BPM. And this was really early on in the process, but the idea was sort of, could we somehow map a heartbeat for the house, not just visually, but internally, so when Jennifer's character is going, the arc that she takes, can it somehow build and slow and build and slow, just sort of dramatically. We didn't really actually follow that all the way through, but what we did hit upon was a really interesting sort of rhythmical beat for the heartbeat in the wall. And so I was able to sort of manipulate that in a way that initially you see it and it's kind of opaque and you don't really see what it quite is, and then it slowly gets a little bit more, the next time you see it, it's a little bit more visually there, and then the cancer sort of starts coming on it, and then the blackness sort of comes on it, so it's another layer of rock, and it's starting to harden and stuff. So that was sort of the idea, was taking sort of natural and real sounds, elephant whale sort of ideas, but not ripping off an elephant whale sound, but actually taking the rhythm of it and then trying to basically make sounds up that would match that sort of thing. So therefore we had flexibility in how we wanted to sort of manipulate it.
Was it important, and I guess you can't control timing, but the fact that this movie's coming up right after 2 devastating hurricanes, does that make what you were writing about a couple of years ago feel even more topical?
I mean, it's depressing as all hell.
Yeah.
I mean, outside of this, I'm on the board of directors of the Sierra Club, and so I'm reading everything that's going on. And 2 years ago when I was writing this, it was incredibly heartbreaking. I talk about, my grandparents came to this country to give me a better life, and I look at my son and I'm scared. And I think that fear is what inspired me to kind of tell a story from her point of view, because it's a story we don't really think about it. It's very hard to understand, but while those two storms are going on, also the largest forest fire in the history of Canada is burning in British Columbia. You don't think about that, but you do think about when someone comes over your house and burns a hole in your carpet with their cigarette, and you never forget that person, So I thought maybe taking this Boonwell idea, taking the Boonwell idea of like putting a dinner party and the surreal concept of them stuck in a room and discussing all of society with that one idea, that, hey, there might be a way to use that to take something really big and make it small and then make it more impactful for people.
Thank you so much. Darren.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Craig.